Catholic Church is one of the only institutions in Irish society which talks about fundamental values, meaning and human purpose. That's a quote, not from a Catholic, but from an atheist. Joe Humphreys, journalist with the Irish Times and author of its weekly philosophy column, Unthinkable. He joins us now, along with Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Roisin.
Joe, tell me, that's an unusual view for an atheist. How did you come to form that view?
Well, it is and it isn't unusual. I mean, I guess a lot of our tone of atheist debate is taken from celebrated atheists of recent times, Richard Dawkins perhaps notably. I take my inspiration more so from Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who wrote a lot on similar themes as Dawkins a couple of decades ago. And he would sort of see that common ground can be forged between atheists and religious believers on issues of common concern. And I suppose his bottom line with this was, look, it doesn't really matter the logic why we reach the viewpoint, why human beings are valuable, why certain patterns of behaviour are to be celebrated, why altruism is good. As long as we agree that these things are goods, these things that we should strive to achieve, it doesn't really matter if one person believes it for religious reasons, if another believes it for humanistic reasons. So that was one of my sort of motivations for it in terms of trying to say that there's a different way of debating with people of religious belief. While I'm an atheist, I recognise a lot of good characteristics about many Christians, about the essential idealism of Christian values, which are very similar to humanistic values and are if you like, universal values. So it was to sort of challenge the tone, and I suppose particularly within Ireland at the moment, there's a lot of heated debates. One at the moment about religious role in education, but also on a number of other sort of topics.
So what you're saying then is the fact that people agree is more important than why they agree. I think
if we can find, I mean, we have to accept from the starting point, as an atheist myself, I would say, look, religion isn't going to disappear overnight, so I have to cohabit on this earth with people of a different belief system who have strong and earnestly held beliefs in religious faith. So, and how to work together on that. And I suppose there are bigger issues. I suppose an element of this is, there are bigger problems than religious belief, and maybe some of this comes back to are the world's problems to be blamed on religion. I would say that there are bigger problems, if you like, than religious belief per se, such as the inequalities, such as food insecurity, global terrorism, all sorts of issues like this which can be tackled across the board.
I'd like to bring Michael in now, Joe, who presumably is sitting in the same studio with you, but in agreement or not, Michael?
Well, of course, Atheist Ireland also discusses issues such as fundamental values and meaning and human purpose. You don't have to go to the Catholic Church for that type of discussion. Joe says that the Catholic Church promotes an egalitarian ethic. But the Catholic Church is literally hierarchical. It's incalculably wealthy. It's financially corrupt. It discriminates against women and gay people in its theology. It discriminates against non-Catholics in its patronage of Irish schools. And Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor told the BBC that atheists are not fully human. That doesn't sound egalitarian to me. And on the contrast, Joe says that religious communities mostly exert a positive influence on societal values. But there's numerous studies that show that atheists and secularists are less nationalistic, less prejudiced, less racist, less dogmatic, and that the happiest countries are typically secular, liberal democracies which have lower rates of homicide, juvenile mortality, sexually transmitted diseases, teen pregnancy, abortion, etc. So the facts don't seem to follow the argument.
I think what we're talking about is something a bit wider, though, Michael. It's almost the Voltaire thing. If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him for the good of society, because society perhaps needs a system of religious belief in order to function as a community, to function socially.
Yeah, but since Voltaire, we've moved on in terms of how we can assess societal values, and there's an organisation called the World Values Survey, which is a team of interdisciplinary social scientists from around the world, and it studies human values. And what it has found is that as individual people are able to move away from survival values and towards self-expression values, which is typically triggered by things like investment in health, education, communications technology, perceived self-control over your life, through democracy and so on, that as people make that shift, societies move away from traditional religious values and towards secular rational values. So if we examine the facts, we find that secularism is actually better for society than religion's values.
But in that case, Michael, why is it then that there was an organisation set up recently for atheists to come together and sing and be in a community and so on? Isn't there a way in which churches form a significant part of how we cooperate with one another, not in sport, in all kinds of things, in leisure, in sport, in just forming support networks for each other?
Of course there is, and the initial point that you're making about atheists doing that is correct, because atheists are human beings. We're all human beings, and these are attributes of being human.
Don't they kind of want some kind of belief in an afterlife? Then I think that's what I'm.
No, I think that's a huge leap. I mean, just because people get together and eat food and sing songs doesn't mean they believe in an afterlife.
Well, perhaps I'm not doing a big leap like that, but perhaps if I can go back to Voltaire again, he said, doubt may be an uncomfortable position, but certainty is ridiculous. So, I mean, are you absolutely certain in your atheism?
Of course not. Most atheists that I know, including Richard Dawkins, are happy to say that we might be mistaken. I mean, it's religious people that typically, when they're faced with things that challenge them, retreat into prayer and convincing themselves by chanting that their beliefs are correct. It may be the case that there's a God. I've no vested interest in there being no God, but based on the currently best available evidence, there is far more evidence to suggest that humans invented the idea of God than that it actually exists.
Well, I don't think Voltaire would disagree with that. Joe, what about you? What is your take on the church's role in building kind of community?
Yeah. Well, actually, one thing, just by the by, Voltaire was a ferocious critic of the Catholic Church as well.
Quite
He probably considered a bit of a more or less an atheist today. But I think the community, I think you could get, I mean, one could say, look, let's replace all religious communities with secular or atheistic communities. That might be, an ideal that some people want to strive after. I wouldn't stand in the way, or I could see merits of certain aspects of that. The reality is you have a network of different communities. I suppose you have religious communities, sporting communities, cultural communities, and can you utilise all these different communities to a greater purpose? And I suppose from an atheist perspective, I would say, look, why not talk to Christians in the language that they are comfortable with? Talk in terms of their own Christian values and say, look, by your own standards, by what is the Christian thing to do? So when you're talking about schools, is it a Christian thing to do to be putting up religious barriers in terms of demanding birth certs at the school gate, or would it be the Christian thing to do to have an open invitation, maybe retain Christian patronage or Catholic or Protestant or Church of Ireland patronage, but invite everyone in on an equal basis? So I think there's arguments there that the Christian community is shirking, because they're sort of saying, this progress or this attempts for reform are all coming from a hostile atheist secularist and a very selective view of that word secularist community, whereas they should be having these debates themselves, and they're shirking them to some degree. And I'd hate to say that's because of a harsh tone from the atheist community, but I think common ground can be found. I mean, the church, from the church side, they're equally they can be easily accused of demonising atheists, as Michael pointed out there, and I think more broadly demonising secularism. Secularism really should be seen as a positive from a church perspective. Secularism effectively is separation of church and state to allow any church flourish in society, and I think it would be welcome if the church toned down its attacks on secularism in that sense.
So Michael, is it possible to have a reasonable dialogue about what you and fellow atheists might agree with Christians, the things that you agree about?
Well, of course it is, and we do it all the time. I mean, I regularly have debates and discussions with Christians and with Muslims and with people of all religions about what we have in common. And what we have in common is that we have senses of compassion and empathy and cooperation and reciprocity and fairness and justice and curiosity and reason. Now, these are human attributes that can move us forward as a society. I agree with Joe on those issues, that it doesn't matter whether you think that it comes from the creator of the universe or whether or as natural evolutionary attributes as social animals. But the distinction is, once you move beyond those discussions into the practical world, we're not the ones that are discriminating against religious people. It's religious people that are discriminating against us.
OK, Michael and Joe, thank you very much indeed.